Good evening. Welcome to the candidate forum for the general election. I'm Maxine Miller with the League of Women Voters, and we sponsor this in partnership with Lewis Clark State College to promote an informed and involved electorate. Tonight's debate will be somewhat altered due to the notification of a write-in candidate. I just received notification from Nez Perce County Elections Office, and I quote, "Steve R. Martin just came into the office and is now an official write-in candidate," end of quote. This email was sent at 2:22 p.m. today, and I did not see it until 4 p.m. today. League protocol has been followed. Candidates whose names appear on the ballot and have opposition in the general election are eligible for invitation to debates sponsored by the League of Women Voters. Write-in candidates shall be considered eligible for invitation to debates upon fulfillment of declaration of intent for write-in candidates. Due to the last-minute notification of fulfillment of Mr. Martin's declaration of intent at the Nez Perce County Clerk's office, the League did not have an opportunity to invite him to participate. The normal and customary accommodations have not been made. I have not been contacted by Mr. Martin, although I did meet him this evening. Therefore, the sponsors will provide him an opportunity to participate in an equal and balanced manner as possible under the circumstances, and we ask the audience to be understanding. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce our moderator for tonight's debate, Gary Bush. You may have known him as a teacher at Lewiston High School, or as a former city councilor and mayor, or as the conductor of the historic trolley tours, to name just a few. Please welcome Gary Bush.
Thank you, Maxine, and the League of Women Voters for this honor. And our sponsors, Lewis Clark State College and the City of Lewiston. Welcome to our audience, whether you are in your home or present tonight. And finally, a very special thanks to our candidates. They are our neighbors that have chosen to make a huge commitment to serve the citizens of our region. This dedication comes at a price: lack of privacy, loss of income, huge time constraints, and the necessity to develop the skin of a rhinoceros. They represent the concept put forward by our founding fathers, that of a citizen statesman. We can all applaud these individuals sitting in front of you. Thank you all. Before we begin our debate, we have a few housekeeping items to discuss with rules and procedures that we all must follow. Turn off all electronic devices and please store them. No personal audio or video recording of this live televised debate is permitted. No portion or excerpts of this program are authorized for any candidate's political campaign. Tonight we will hear from the candidates in the general election. There will be no opening or closing statements by these candidates. The moderator will introduce the candidates with biographical sketch, if we've been provided one. And we ask the audience to be respectfully silent during the public forum and refrain from any display or distraction during this program. The questions for the candidates have been developed by the League of Women Voters. Each question has a time limit, and the League timekeeper is seated in front of the candidates which is a big relief to me. She waives the cards. Candidates have not received the questions ahead of the debate. Candidates have been instructed to prepare to pose a question to their opponent. A time limit will be imposed for the answer. The candidates have been instructed to yield their allotted time if they do not have something new to add to what has already been said. They have the right to acknowledge their position. So, for the audience, you should have in front of you a bright yellow sample ballot for your information. Keep it and take it with you when you go to vote. You should have a flyer with the names of the candidate. We okay? You should have a flyer with the names of the candidates, rebroadcast information on Channel 56 and the City of Lewiston's YouTube service. You should have a piece of paper to write a question to the candidates throughout the program. If you need a pen or a pencil, please raise your hand, and the LCSC political science greeters will be collecting the questions throughout the program. During the first part of this program, we will hear from the 5 commissioner candidates. During the second part, we'll hear from the 4 state representative candidates. The final segment will be the time for the audience to pose a written question to the candidates. And make sure that you clearly write your questions. Ask a question that can be answered in 1 minute, and the league reserves the right to review and select the questions that the audience submits that are most germane to the office. So let's begin with the 5 county commissioners. We begin the debate with the county commissioner positions. I will introduce each candidate with their personal information, repeat the question, and allow their answer. The candidates will be asked each question on a rotating basis throughout the evening. Our first candidate, Bob Blakey, for County Commissioner, District 1.
Don Beck is one. Somehow your order may be.
Good, no. Sorry, Don Beck, County Commissioner for District 1. Don, 67, was born and raised in Idaho. He graduated from Blackfoot High School. He attended Ricks College, Idaho State University, and Lewis Clark State College. Don and Michelle have a combined family of 8 children and 23 grandchildren. He's lived in Lewiston for the last 40 years and retired in 2016 from Idaho Department of Fish and Game. This is your candidate for Nez Perce County Commissioner, District 1, Don Beck. And Mr. Beck, your question is, what is your motivation for running for this office, and what do you plan to accomplish if elected? 1 minute.
For many years, I wasn't able to run because I worked for Idaho Fish and Game Department. I decided that now's the time to do it. Now that I'm retired, I have a lot of time. And so I feel that I owe it to my family to further the great area that we live in. I want to help with the building of some wonderful things in Lewiston. I find that we have a very beautiful area here. We need some great things to happen. I think that with my experience in the things that I've been able to do over the years in construction, that I can add to the county commission, and I'm here for your vote.
Thank you, Mr. Beck. Next candidate is Bob Blakey, County Commissioner, District 1. Mr. Blakey is 64. He lives in Lewiston. He has a bachelor's degree in science. Retired from D.A. Davidson after 29 years. Currently a substitute teacher in the Clarkston School District. He and his wife Molly have resided in Lewiston for the past 28 years and have a daughter, Sarah, and son, Robert. He has served 5 years on the Lewiston City Council. Mr. Blakey is your candidate for Nez Perce County Commissioner, District 1. Mr. Blakey, what is your motivation for running for this office and what you plan to accomplish if elected?
Well, first of all, I want to thank everybody for being here tonight. It's an exciting opportunity to be my fourth time talking in front of you all. So it's always an opportunity to hear what we have to say and what we want to say. Government works best when we work together. And I believe that's missing right now in our local government. When you get the city and the county together, it's like a cat fight. And I think we need to improve on that. And that's one of the reasons why I am running. As we go forward, I truly believe money is going to come short. There are major projects in front of us that the city and county are going to have to work on together. We should not be in competition with each other. We are in competition with the Northwest. We need to figure out a way to work together to bring business and opportunity and development here to the valley. And we can do that. We need to be working with all the cities in our county and alongside our tribal governments to make this a better place to live. And that's what I intend to do, and I intend to get elected, and my goal is to be the best county commissioner I can be.
Thank you. The third candidate, write-in candidate, is Steve Martin. Mr. Martin, what is your motivation for running for this office, and what do you plan to accomplish if elected?
Thank you for the question. The question before us today is not what we're here to do, it's what we're here to do for those children, that little baby over there and all you out there. That's the future, you know, and we're sitting here and we're going to set policy for the future. I would expect that we need to grow. North Central Idaho is far behind Southern Idaho, Southeastern Idaho, and far north Idaho. We're in the middle of the end. If we don't get something going here, they're going to bypass us and we're going to lose a lot. I would recommend that we go overseas, and instead of sending stuff over there, we get them to come over here and buy our stuff. I've been to Korea. Korea is a very friendly country for us, and thank you very much. We'll go back.
Thank you. Are we able to hear out in the audience? It's very, very low, and they're having difficulty hearing.
Mike's not
So,
on.
The mic's not on?
I don't know, the monitor system behind you. We're addressing that at this moment. We have two candidates for County Commissioner District 3. First one is Bob Hasenoehrl. Bob is 60 years old and owner-operator of Lewiston M&W and Appliance, which he started in 1982. Cul-de-sac high school graduate, Lewis Clark State College, applied science in appliance repair and commercial electronics degree, and lived in Nez Perce County for all of his life with his wife Cindy and sons Zach, Ryan, and Daniel. This is your candidate, Bob Hasenoehrl, for Nez Perce County Commissioner District 3. What is your motivation for running for this office, and what do you plan to accomplish if elected?
My motivation for running for this office was four things. One was the airport. Number two, we haven't talked about it yet, was stormwater. Number three, communication between the county and the city. We don't communicate. We seem to argue with each other. I agree with Bob. And number four, to promote growth in the valley, in the Nez Perce County. And my number one goal here right now today would be the airport. You guys, we read about it in the paper. We've been reading it for about a year now. Just we need to clean up the airport, and I've got some ideas on doing that. Thank you.
Thank you. Our other candidate for County Commissioner District 3 is Doug Zenner. He's a lifelong Nez Perce County resident with his wife Corrine and his daughters Carrie, Janelle, and Renee. He's a graduate of Cul-de-sac High School, or Cul-de-sac, a bachelor's degree in political science from this institution, Lewis Clark State College. He's the District 3 Nez Perce County Commissioner since 2005 to the present, and as such holds numerous committee chair positions regionally and throughout Idaho. Mr. Zenner is a board member of the Idaho Cattle Association and Sacred Heart Parish in Lapway. Mr. Zenner is your candidate for Nez Perce County Commissioner District 3. What is your motivation for running for this office, and what do you plan to accomplish if elected?
First of all, thank you all for attending tonight, both here and on TV. I have 4 primary goals. They're really very simple. Expand and retain businesses, because that's jobs in our valley. Second is to push back on the legislature on unfunded mandates. They get income tax and sales tax, we get the dreaded property tax. We need to push back. Third is I authored the plan to pay off the jail 8 years early, saving $1.15 million in interest alone. I would like to see the bond payments go away, and that's another reason. And lastly, but not leastly, we need to leverage our grant dollars to rebuild our aging county infrastructure. Those are my 4 goals, fairly simple, fairly knowledgeable on each. I appreciate your vote.
Thank you. The second question, and remember this will be on a rotating basis throughout the next 7 questions for the candidates. The first candidate would be Mr. Blakey. Question number 2 is, should the airport authority be dissolved? Part B of that, should the management be returned to the city as it was before the authority was created? Why or why not?
Answer to the first question is no. Answer to the second question is no. There are 3 very qualified people working on that board right now. 3 folks, 2 of them were picked by the city, and the 3rd was selected by the committee themselves. It's time for the county to step up and put two more qualified people on that board. That board can work and do its job. I see them doing their job. I've been to their meetings. I know what they're doing, and I hear what they're doing, and they have a vision, and they're working towards a vision. Stephanie, the manager, is competent. If people would leave her alone and let her do her job, we'd see that. But every day when you wake up and you think someone's on your back, it'd be awful hard for you to do your job. I'm very comfortable with the board. They have a vision, as I said earlier, and I see them going forward. And I'm looking forward to great things happening in our airport.
Thank you. Mr. Hasenoehrl, should the airport authority be dissolved? Should the management be returned to the city as it was before the authority was created?
No, I'm a no too. I think what we should do is the city and the county should sit down with the airport board and the new airport board and with the manager and go into executive session with a lawyer and talk this out, find out what the problem is. It seems like you read about in the paper, we put on 2 new board members and they lasted 30 days. What is the issue? What's going on up there? We read about it. We're getting tired of reading about it. So we lost 2 board members 6 months ago. We wouldn't let, give you an idea, we read about Lohman in the paper. And we also, Ed Schweitzer. I mean, something's going on. We lost the airline too. We lost Horizon. So we need to figure out what's going on. So we need to talk. Sometimes we don't talk to each other. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Zenner, should the airport authority be dissolved? Should the management be returned to the city as it was before the authority was created?
Well, the answer to the first one is fairly easy. That is, no, but if the airport doesn't turn around, yes. It should. That's a fairly obvious answer. So you read about the negativity all the time. Let's talk about the positives. We have the most favorable climate and topography around the area. We have a control tower. Let's don't lose it. We have grants that are coming in. The AOB building, the south side, the fire truck, the snow plow. I mean, there's a lot of positives here. And lastly, we just need to talk. I agree, everybody needs to talk. But, and the management, hey, I agree. Sometimes you might have to get the management together and do a thorough appraisal of her job description and her management style.
Thank you. Mr. Beck, Should the airport authority be dissolved, and should the management return to the city as it was before the authority was created?
No, we have probably one of the best areas for an airport. We have people that need to grow up, need to start working together, need to communicate with one another. We need to get those people so that they understand that your own personal agendas are not what's going to make this airport go. We need people on that board that is invested in building this airport in the very best possible condition it can be. We can have great flights in and out of here. We can see our county grow and the city grow because we have a decent airport. And I think that if you do those things and we get them down to where they can sit and communicate, I think we can solve that problem.
Thank you. Mr. Martin, should the airport authority be dissolved? Should the management be returned to the city as it was before the authority was created?
Great question. Yeah, and we probably all ought to go back to Europe, but no, do not dissolve the airport board. We need to give it a chance. I was instrumental in providing a copy of an airport agreement from the Paso Robles Airport and somewhere south. Anyway, that was devised into the new authority guidance. And also, the bylaws for the Airport Authority Board were poorly written in the initial, and they've been redone. Let's get this thing on ground. Let's get some people in from the county. Let's go forward. We need that airport. The only other alternative is to turn it in to a racetrack, NHRA. Thank you.
Thank you. Question number 3. Mr. Martin, what are your 3 highest priorities for the county?
Only 3? All right. The highest priority is what we just spoke about, the airport, and that's a foregone conclusion. We absolutely need the airport. We can't progress without it. So that's priority 1. Priority 2 is to increase business within the valley. Now, we all talk about it, but what are we going to do about it? Well, I'm going to get busy and find somebody that wants to come in here and plant some kind of industry, and all that lumber and all those logs going down the river maybe could go down cut instead of raw log to Japan and China and so forth. That would be priority 2. Priority 3, city and county gotta work together. If they can't, there's no answer to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hasenoehrl, what are your 3 highest priorities for the county?
I think we talked about one of the priorities being the airport. One of the priorities nobody's talking about, I'm on the LYD board, and we were approached by the city of Lewiston about stormwater. They flooded out a couple of houses, as you've seen last year with the stormwater. He came up with some ideas, and we came up with some ideas, some solutions to help out with the stormwater. Instead of going over the hill, we live up in the orchards. We have, give you an idea, we've got Gun Club Road, we got 13th Street, we got 15th Street, we got canyons there, 18th Street. We can divert that water over and not flood out and take some of that water pressure away from going down. We can create a flood zone downtown too. That's one thing nobody's talking about is the stormwater. We're going to get hit with that tax here pretty soon. And the last but not least, we do need to communicate. We need to talk between the city and the county. We're not doing that. And that shows up. That shows up everywhere. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Zenner, what are your 3 highest priorities for the county?
I think I said them in my opening little remarks. It's expand and retain business here in the valley, because that provides jobs, replace our aging infrastructure, make sure we leveraging the grants properly, and lastly but not leastly is it has always been my idea that we be very transparent in whatever we do. And if I could go back to some comments, You know, we, as a county and a city, we have a lot of shared programs that the other ones haven't been talking about. Emergency Management Director, that's a shared position. We have Southway Bridge. We have the boat ramps that we communicate with regularly on all aspects of it. To sit up here and say that we don't communicate is just flat wrong. We do. We have disagreements, yes. Nobody's denying that.
Thank you. Mr. Beck, your 3 highest priorities for the county.
Well, likewise, I feel that communication is very important. In order to be able to do government, people need to be able to work together. And I think that though the county and the city have different ways of doing things, I think we can still share some of those important things to better each other. I think also the airport needs to be fixed, and I think we also need to build a business structure, use our URA to bring in more businesses as we improve these areas that are of concern. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Blakey, 3 highest priorities for the county.
Commissioner Zenner touched on one of them, is unfunded mandates, or mandates that are not fully funded. Our judicial system, our court system is so important to the people in Nez Perce County, and it's a burden that's bared by our taxpayers. We are not funded appropriately at the state level. We need to continue to be the best that we can do in that department, and that is a very expensive aspect of running the county. Other things that are important to me is joint projects. As I said earlier, city, county need to be looking down the road and say, what can we do jointly? They are looking at a courthouse. We are talking about a police station. There's an opportunity for a justice center. Gun Club Road, is it gonna come to the top of importance as soon as that high school is open? And that road goes in between the city and county, as does Warner Avenue. These are projects that the city and county need to be working on today. We need to be starting that project right away. So those are just a couple of my comments. Maybe I should have done a third one. If I didn't, that's okay. I see right now that we've got to work together.
Thank you. If you have any questions for the candidates, remember, Elijah, raise your hand back there. There we go. We have somebody that'll pick them up. You can put them to the aisles and he'll pick them up, or wave at them. We have one up here in front. Elijah? We have a question up front, so when you get a chance. Thank you. Question number 4 for the commissioners. Mr. Zenner, do you agree with the way the Urban Renewal Agency, the URA, projects are selected?
Yes and no. Frankly, what I believe is a better term is, do I believe that they should be closed when the project is completed? Yes. Do I like the idea that they can go on forever? No. That's where we're at. So URA has some good functioning properties. We've talked with the city about Bryden Avenue. You know, they didn't mention that. We've also talked to the city about 21st Street and the main intersection and East Main water line. We're okay with that. So sometimes maybe people get the wrong impression by who's telling the story. Well, I'm here to tell you, we cooperate. We have a little disagreement every once in a while, but we cooperate.
Thank you. Mr. Beck, do you agree with the way the Urban Renewal Agency projects are selected?
I have to say yes in many ways, but I also agree with Commissioner Zenner that I think there needs to be more discussion on those projects. I think there needs to be more planning. I think that also they need to be closed down when they're finished. We drag them on too long, and it drains that tax base. I think it's very important that they work really close together in coming up with projects that complement both the county and the city. And if you do that, I think you'll have a winning combination.
Thank you. Mr. Martin, do you agree with the way the Urban Renewal Agency projects are selected?
Yes, I do. I'd like to see a lot more emphasis on improving areas that are necessary for the disabled. Mobility issues in the city are, well, we're working on them, but there's a long ways to go there. As with any old city, 1861, bring it forward, we got a long ways to go before we're in compliance with the ADA guidelines. So I'd like to see Urban Renewal Agency money spent in that area. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Blakey, do you agree with the way the Urban Renewal Agency projects are selected?
Absolutely. I've had the privilege of sitting on that board for the past 5 years. And during the past 5 years, I have seen nothing but wonderful things happen. I have seen development come to the city of Lewiston. I've seen progress. I'm looking forward to the opening of the Gun Club Road here in the next 30 days or so. The excitement of the sewer project. Many of you don't know that when we originally put in that East Orchard sewer project, we expected 27 hookups. Right now, we're pushing 55 and it's going up. And that doesn't even count a private developer who is talking about anywhere between 20 and 40 additional developments on that same sewer line. The nice thing about that committee, and I think many people fail to remember, it is made up of 7 members. And one of those members is a member of the county. So the selection of the projects is in depth. And there was a survey done several years ago, which from that survey, we were able to identify our top projects. And Bryden Canyon is quickly rising to the top.
Thank you.
Bryden Avenue, I apologize.
Mr. Hasenoehrl, do you agree with the way the Urban Renewal Agency projects are selected?
Yes, I do. I think one thing that we need to do with the urban renewal project is like what's happened with Gun Club Road. We're building a new high school, and we're also, we need to plan ahead. So when we build this new high school, we put that new road in. If you've never noticed, we have no guardrails going down Gun Club Road. When we have the construction crew in there, we have a cliff that's on the side there. We could have saddled that with the URA to take that cliff out, move the pole up, and put the guardrails in, because eventually I have a concern when that high school goes in that we might have an accident there. So I do think the URA is doing a good job. I think I'm on Bryden Avenue with the business and stuff, and I'm talking to Bob about different things they can do. They need to contact the local people who are involved with the URA and give advice and tell us what they're thinking. Thank you.
Thank you. Question 5 is for those candidates that are on the ballot. And question 5 is each have an opportunity to pose a question to your opponent. Mr. Beck will ask Mr. Blakey a question. Mr. Blakey will ask Mr. Beck a question. We'll start with Mr. Beck.
Bob, in the paper here a while back, on your turnabout, you made a remark about a number of saving multi-million dollars worth of taxes, property tax, and I'd like to hear more about that.
Yahoo! I was hoping someone would ask that question. Well, let's start with Proposition 2. If that passes this fall in the election, nearly $1 million right now is being budgeted for indigent care in the county budget. That number won't go away completely, but that number will shrink dramatically. There is an opportunity to free some money up. It's a budgeted number. It can be subtracted from the base, lowering your property tax. I applaud the county for paying off the jail early. Okay, there's 2 payments a year made, roughly $600,000 a year is each payment. What's going to happen when that payment comes to an end next year? Will it be kept in the budget? Will it be used to finance another project? That's not what you voted for 8-10 years ago. That money should be subtracted from the base. That could be up to a $1.2 million savings right there alone. So those are 2 significant issues that we can use to reduce your cost to operate the county.
Thank you. Mr. Blakey, you will now ask a question, or if you wish, of Mr. Beck.
Mr. Beck, at our August budget hearing, you stated that you're no financial expert. You're no expert on financial issues. You went on to remark that the city is overextended, and you don't see where it's going. My question is a follow-up comment on the URA. Can you explain your understanding on how the agency works and the benefit it provides to the city and county governments?
I understand that the URA was set up to redevelop areas of decline in cities and to also bring in business. And I believe that that's what the URA should be doing, is bringing in businesses to build the tax base in Lewiston and in the county. I believe that the projects that they do, once again, they need to be planned properly, that they need to be organized so that when they start, they have said we have a deadline when this is to be finished, and then as soon as it's done, then you close that down, move on to another. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hasenoehrl, you have the opportunity to ask Mr. Zenner a question, and then Mr. Zenner, you will have the opportunity to ask Mr. Hasenoehrl. First, Mr. Hasenoehrl.
Okay, Mr. Zenner, I'm a budget guy. I always look at what it costs us and stuff. And just to give you an idea, I was looking at the budget, and on the 2017 budget for, let me pull this up. Well, actually, I'll just go on your budget. The 2017 budget just for the commissioners was $1.33 million. In 2018, the budget was $2.798 million, more than doubled. And then the budget you're projecting for next year is $3.695 million, which is a $900,000 increase. I was looking at the budget on 2012 for the overall budget on the county, it was $27,000. I looked at the 2018 budget, it was $39,000. We have $11 million budget difference there. And compared to, my question is, and I noticed that our new budget's gonna be $44.4 million, I think $2 million. Anyway, my question is, what is in that budget from 2017 to 2018 on your part?
He's asking for a specific line item, so I'll try to give you an honest answer. In our commissioner's line item that he's talking about is our jail payment. We need to make sure, by accounting and being transparent, that when we go to make that jail payment, we take the monies that's going out, about $2.2 million, and move them down to our jail project line item, and that's what we expend to pay out for our jail bond payment. That's the only difference. As far as those other numbers, 27,000.
27 million.
You said 1,000, but that's
Sorry,
beside the point. Anyway, you said 29,000 or something. That's the overall budget, and that includes wages, fees that we are collected in-house for our services, and grants and everything else. That's how we do it. We are very transparent in how we do budgeting.
Thank you. Mr. Zenner, you may ask Mr. Hasenoehrl a question.
I thought about asking a question, but you know what? It's gotcha politics. That's really not where we're at. We are about public service. So if the people up here want to be public servants, we don't need to be playing gotcha. Sorry, I don't have a question.
Thank you. Question 6 for the county commissioners. Mr. Blakey, do you support the ballot proposition 2 to expand Medicaid eligibility? How will the outcome affect Nez Perce County?
Well, I just had an opportunity to talk about that. If you had a chance to look at the budget this year for the county, again, nearly $1 million is being appropriated for indigent care. Again, as I said, not all of that will go away. But have I been a supporter of Proposition 2? You bet. The first time I saw that green van show up in this valley a year and a half ago, I knew that was right for this community. I knew that was right for the 1,600 folks in this valley who do not have any kind of health insurance. I know it's right for the 800 women who make up that 1,600 people that don't have health insurance. I know it's right for them. Absolutely, I support it. It is a budget savings right now for the county. That money in Proposition 2 that we're not keeping in the state is going to other states. Let's bring it back to Idaho. Let's put it to work. Let's make it a tax savings for all of you.
Thank you. Mr. Hasenoehrl, do you support ballot Proposition 2 to expand Medicaid eligibility? How will the outcome affect Nez Perce County?
Well, I didn't have a real good chance to read that. Just to give you a personal aspect of that is I lost my doctor. My doctor retired. So I called around to see if I could get a doctor to take care of us. I called 3 offices. Out of all 3 offices, the first question out of their mouth was Medicaid. We do not take Medicaid anymore. So this Proposition 2 might take care of one problem, but it didn't take care of the other problem. We're not paying the doctors enough to take on Medicaid. They can't afford to take it on. So really, does it really work, Proposition 2? We need to look at it's a 2-part question, a 2-part answer. Right now, the doctors aren't taking Medicaid. They're taking insurance, but they're not taking Medicaid. They won't take half of what they're making. Would you take half of what you're making? Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Zenner, do you support ballot Proposition 2 to expand Medicaid eligibility? How will the outcome affect Nez Perce County?
Well, we've already talked about this so-called savings, but I prefer to answer that question this way. The bigger question is, what does the medical and health profession in Idaho look like? We are rural. We don't have doctors in the rural. We have lots of mental health issues that we need to address. Does Prop 2 help them? Not really. What we need to focus in is on a total comprehensive package addressing affordable health in the rural parts of the county. You can go to Ada County. They have all kinds of medical professionals down here. Come to Nez Perce County. No, we don't. Do we have rural telehealth? No, but we're working on it. We're trying to find affordable health care with what we have. It needs to be a total package, not one issue only. It needs to be a total package.
Thank you. Mr. Beck, do you support ballot Proposition 2 to expand Medicaid eligibility? How will the outcome affect Nez Perce County?
I signed it when it first came out, but I've been doing some real study because I'm not sure it's what really we need. I think that any time the government gets involved in things, it starts costing more and more money. You can talk about free money that comes back. There's no such thing as free money. It costs. And I agree that we need to do something in Idaho to help those people that need insurance. I think that the Idaho Exchange is trying to do that. I think we should give them a chance. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Martin, do you support ballot Proposition 2 to expand Medicaid eligibility, and how would the outcome affect Nez Perce County?
Yes, I voted for it already. Although that, I agree with Mr. Zenner wholeheartedly. Every word he spoke on this issue is my feelings exactly. However, you know, maybe we should concentrate efforts on future development of our medical profession in the valley. Let's bring some doctors in here, some very qualified doctors. And the way we're gonna do that is to expand our tax base. And that being said, you know, more business gonna equal a bigger tax base, more work, more jobs, and more health care, because those people will come if we build it. Thank you.
Thank you. Question 7, Mr. Hasenoehrl, do you believe the courthouse should be remodeled or a new one built, and how would you fund your chosen option?
Well, at this time, we should remodel the courthouse. I mean, take care of what we got. You know, if we don't take care of what we got, we're gonna wind up just like what happened to Civic Theater. The roof cave in. So we need to take care of what we got and look down the road and look at our options to take care of this. I was talking to somebody today about this. I don't know if you guys read in the paper about the sales tax, you know, for the smaller towns, for like Lewiston and stuff, to help them build different things. And I guess the state's not doing it. We need to look more into that. We've got money coming available from the jail bond, which comes up. We need to bring this up to the people. The people need to do the voting on this kind of stuff. They're the ones who are gonna benefit from this over the years. But right now, take care of what we've got. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Zenner, do you believe the courthouse should be remodeled or a new one built, and how would you fund your chosen option?
Well, you know, you've heard the old statement, a Band-Aid covers a lot of small cuts. Well, we probably need a tourniquet on the courthouse. And I don't know any other way to say it nicely. It's a very elderly building. It's got 3 sections, built in the 1800s, in the early 1900s, and then last in the 50s. And we are cramped upstairs for space for the court floors. We have ADA compliance issues we have to address, not to mention electrical, HVAC, water pressure, you name it. So, what is that option? Well, the option is you go look at a county facility needs assessment, and you see where you need to prioritize your dollars going forward. It'd be nice if we had a new courthouse, but you know what? Let's try to prioritize our county building structure first before we start expending out. That's my position.
Thank you. Mr. Beck, do you believe the courthouse should be remodeled or a new one built? How would you fund your chosen option?
Well, having a background in construction, I know how much it costs to repair. Some buildings are somewhat beyond the repair stage. I feel that the courthouse is coming into that category. Plus the fact that it's not large enough to house the people that are working in there. They're almost working on each other. And I think that down the road that we need to continue to try and come up with the financing to possibly start looking towards a grant, or not a grant, but a bond, and put it to the voters. I think that if people were to go down and look at the foundation as I have, you'd be amazed that it's even standing today.
Thank you, Mr. Beck. Mr. Martin, do you believe the courthouse should be remodeled or a new one built, and how would you fund that?
Well, there's no doubt, we need a new courthouse. You know, that one's got so many Band-Aids, you know, even the generics are gone now. So, yes, we need a new courthouse. How would you fund it? Well, unfortunately, you'd probably have to float a bond or something like that. I don't think it needs to be done immediately, though. I agree. We should prioritize, as Mr. Zenner said, I believe. Mr. Zenner said, you know, we need a needs assessment and prioritize what needs to be built and rebuilt and go from there. And, you know, maybe look for somebody to buy the old building before we get too carried away to build a new one. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Blakey.
Before Bob Tippett retired, he floated an idea one time at a URA meeting and then privately with me later. Would the high school be an appropriate place? The Lewiston High School, the current Lewiston High School, would that be an appropriate place to locate court services? So I'm going to say that's an idea that should be looked at. Having been on the city council and still being on the city council, I know what it's like to replace or to abandon an aging building. The Methodist Church, the old Civic Theater, now called the Bollinger Building. There's a lot of folks that have ties to that courthouse, emotional, historical. So whatever we do, I agree with Mr. Zenner, there needs to be a needs assessment. We need to make sure that we are answering what I believe cooperatively, working together with the city and the county to see what we may be able to do jointly. And if that's a new facility where we can appropriately move into that, I would be supportive of that.
Thank you, candidates for County Commissioner. This concludes the prepared questions for the County Commissioners. Candidates, you will have an opportunity to ask some questions during the last part of the program. If you have any questions, pass them over. That's what this big note says. So please, we have someone walking around, so just pass them over to the edge, and we will get those questions filtered. Thank you. we have part two, which is state representative candidates. Dr. Thyra Stevenson, State Representative, Position A. Thyra Stevenson is age 74, Lewiston High School graduate with a bachelor's degree in English and a master's degree in Spanish and a PhD in Latin American literature. She was married 41 years to the late Walt Greenham. 5 children and 12 grandchildren, a church elder, a lifelong musician, a certified teacher, a jet pilot captain, and is a colonel, I believe, in the United States Coast Guard Auxiliary. She was a member of the Lewiston City Council, the Airport Advisory Board, and current representative in Idaho House 2 terms. This is your candidate for Idaho State Representative, Position A, Thyra Stevenson. Dr. Stevenson, what is your motivation for running for this office, and what do you plan to accomplish if elected?
Thank you, Gary, and it's nice to be here, and it's fun to be able to talk about what we do in the legislature. As a member of the airport, the original Airport Commission, and then the City Council, it became quickly obvious to me that we had a lot of unfunded mandates, and that in order to deal with those, it would be a good idea to get onto the state legislature. So you facilitated my becoming a member, and I appreciate that. This is my 2nd term. I'm running for my 3rd term, and I have enough seniority that I can be a chairman of a committee and affect a great deal for our district, which I'm looking forward to.
Thank you, Dr. Stevenson. Our next candidate for the same position A is Rick Tousley. He's a 65-year-old retired educator. He taught in Lewis County 18 years and moved to Lewiston in 2009. Rick and his wife Cheryl have 3 children, 2 daughters-in-laws, and 2 grandsons. He holds a BA in elementary education from Utah State and a master's degree in educational administration from the University of Idaho. Rick currently serves on Lewiston's Planning and Zoning Commission. This is your candidate for Idaho State Representative, Position A, Rick Tousley. What's your motivation for running for this office, and what do you plan to accomplish?
Thank you, League of Women Voters, for having me here today. I've been excited sitting here listening to everyone else speak, and it's finally our chance. I'm excited to do that. When I first started doing this, I really had to examine myself as to why I wanted to run for this. And I just looked around this community, and I looked at Boise, and I looked at some of the other areas that are really doing quite well. Their businesses are booming. Housing seems to be going well. They don't have any real major issues. And I look at District 6 and I see that we still seem to be stuck in the recession. And I wonder why that is. And I look at the people who are truly struggling in this area, who are doing 2 and 3 jobs and have no health benefits, who have no low-income housing to speak of that they can live in to have a decent roof over their head. And I don't believe that the people who are in Boise at this time really are looking out for those people. And there's a huge amount of them here, and we all know that.
Thank you. Mike Kingsley is a state representative for and candidate for Position B. 58 years old, Mr. Kingsley is currently employed by the state of Idaho as a representative from District 6. He's a graduate of Lewiston High School, and out of high school attended BLT Radio License School to obtain his first-class radio telephone license. A lifelong Idahoan, born in St. Mary's, Idaho, and has lived in Lewiston most of his life. He's married to Carolyn for 35 years and has 3 children, Bradley, Lucas, and Katie, who's a senior at the University of Idaho. He currently holds the office of District 6 State Legislator. This is your candidate for Idaho State Representative Position B, Mike Kingsley. And what is your motivation for running for this office, and what do you plan to accomplish?
Well, thank you, and again, thanks for attending, and League of Women Voters, this is always a great time that we can just kind of sit back and hear from each other and what's going on, so it's exciting to be here. You've given me the opportunity to go down to Boise and serve, and I did exactly what I said I was going to do. I kept my promises, and I think that's unusual for a politician, but I'm kind of proud of that. You know, I said I was going to fight for the grocery tax, and it looks like we're finally having motivation to where that's going to go. Said I'd fight for education. I did that. I said I was going to take on addiction issues, and I did that. So I've kind of proud of what I've done, and I've got a lot more to do, and I need to get back down there. So thank you very much.
Thank you. John Rusche, candidate for State Representative, position B. Dr. John Rusche, 67, is a 38-year resident of Lewiston. His wife, Kate, unfortunately died last year, and he has one daughter, Caitlin. He has a chemical engineering degree and is an MD. He's retired after service as a pediatrician at Valley Medical and was Chief Medical Officer of Regents Blue Shield of Idaho. Dr. Rusche has served on numerous state and local boards and commissions, including the Health Insurance Exchange, the Health Planning Commission, Lewis-Clark Valley Health Foundation, CASA, Rotary, and Idaho Nonprofit Center. Between 2004 and 2016, he represented District 6 in the Idaho House, serving 8 years as minority leader. This is your candidate for Idaho State Representative position B, Dr. John Rusche, and your motivation for running for office and what you plan to accomplish.
Thank you, Gary. Thanks to the League of Women Voters and to LCSC and Madam President for this opportunity. I'm running again because I still think I have service to provide. That's been a sincere motivator in my life, providing service to patients as a pediatrician, to the employees and the customers of Blue Shield, and then to the district that I served for 12 years. I'd like to thank Mike here for his service and also his courage to show to a debate. And I'm sure that we'll get more into it as we go further on.
Thank you. Question 2 for the state representative candidates. Mr. Tousley, do you support state or private operations of Idaho prisons? Explain your understanding of the problem areas within the prison system and what needs to be done.
I don't believe in the privatization of prisons. There's a lot of issues with that. We are having prisoners that are right now contracted to be out in other parts of the country. We have prisoners in Texas right now that we're paying for them. And bringing that up, we also are talking about a $500 million prison to be put someplace in the state of Idaho. And from my point of view, and part of the reason why I'm running for this office is because I don't deal with the effects of things. I want to know the causes of things. Why in the state of Idaho do we have to build a $500 million prison when we can't fund education properly? So we already know that by the time a child is in the 2nd grade, they are not going, we can pretty well tell when if they're going to be needing those special services. And if we're not providing those things, you either pay up front or you pay down the road. I don't believe in privatization of prisons. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tousley. Mr. Kingsley, do you support state or private operations of Idaho prisons? Explain your understanding of the problems areas within the prison system and what needs to be done. You have 90 seconds.
Well, thank you, Gary. No, I don't think, I think a proper role of government is that we do pay to house prisoners. I don't believe in private prisons. I don't think that's a good issue with our tax dollars. But, you know, 85% of people that are incarcerated can relate their incarceration to either alcohol or drugs. That's where we need to start focusing. We need to start seeing why, you know, where's that issue and how can we correct it? The $500 million, you know, this started in 1978, I believe. The war on drugs started causing prisoners to where we started incarcerating instead of building schools. And we need to return to where we're building schools instead of prisons. So I think that's where we really need to focus on is let's get to the bottom of this addiction issues. I've opened a lot of doors down in Boise, and I'm going to continue to do that because that's, I think, you know, it's like number 50 in the priority list. I want to move that up to number 2 or number 3 because we have to do that. That's where we're going to start saving money is not only with prisons, but domestic violence, everything that falls back onto addiction issues.
Thank you. Dr. Rusche, do you support state or private operations of prisons, and explain your understanding of the problem areas?
No, I don't support private management of prisons. I happen to live through the Corrections Corporation of America fiasco that we did approximately a decade ago that I think we're still paying for. It just doesn't make any sense. Why would you save money by paying somebody else's profit margin, which is what you do with a private prison? So no, we shouldn't. But what we should do is we should take the money and put that at the front end. We should put it on identification and treatment. We should put it into drug courts. And we should do whatever we can do to keep people out of prison and say prison only for those that are violent.
Thank you. Dr. Stevenson, do you support state or private operations of Idaho prisons, and explain your understanding of the problem areas?
Thank you. As you know, in Idaho, we have both. We have state prisons and we have one private prison. And I would say that the important thing is not to be worrying about which we have, but to look at the economics. Does it pencil out to be private or state-run? And second, is it delivering the performance of what we want out of a prison? And when each of the types of prisons delivers both of those, then if it works, if it's economical, and if it's performing to what we want, then we need both.
Thank you. At this point, we'll ask again for your questions of either the county commission positions or the state representative positions. If you'd like to pass them over, wave them a little bit. We have this fine young man to pick them up and take them back to our panel. Thank you. The rest of the questions that we have for the state representative positions are 1 minute. This is question 3. Mr. Kingsley, if proposition number 2 on the Medicaid expansion passes, what is the role of the legislators to implement it?
Well, I'm on the record of saying I will support Proposition 2 if it's the will of the people, but I'm not in favor of it. I just think that, we're borrowing money to pay for health insurance, and it's just, to me, that just doesn't make a lot of sense. But I do think that, like I've said, I'm on the record of supporting it if it's the will of the people.
Thank you. Dr. Rusche, if Proposition 2 on the Medicaid expansion passes, what is the role of the legislators to implement it?
Well, the role of the legislators will be to follow the law that was adopted by the people, and that is to appropriately fund and organize the Department of Health and Welfare to exist under the law. This is one place where Mike and I really differ. I have supported for years expansion of coverage to people in the gap. I know it causes excess preventable deaths. I know it costs us it's cost us hundreds of millions of dollars by not participating in Medicaid. To me, it's been a no-brainer. Even now, 5 years in, I think it still saves us money, it still saves us lives, and it helps the people that are most needing it, the working poor of Idaho who are not eligible for use of the exchange.
Thank you. Dr. Stevenson, Proposition 2, Medicaid expansion passes. What is the role of the legislators to implement it?
So Proposition 2, a lot of people I've found when I am talking with them think, okay, if that passes tomorrow, we expand Medicaid. But that's not what Proposition 2 says. Proposition 2, and it's great that we have the public being able to weigh in. It's not the role of the legislature, it's the role of the public to either pass it or not. And what it does is direct the State Department of Health and Welfare to revise the state health plan, turn it into the organization that manages Medicaid, which is called CMS. And then we would then, as a legislature, would come back, JFAC would appropriate funds. There may be a lot more discussion. So there's quite a bit of discussion and movement that needs to go on. It's the job of the legislature to make sure that all of the actions are followed, that we look into any possibilities that we may need to make some changes in the health plan, and that's what we'll do.
Thank you. Mr. Tousley, Proposition 2 on Medicaid expansion passes. What is the role of legislators to implement it?
I find it interesting that if you watch the debate from last year, this question came up. And it was not about Proposition 2, it was about Medicaid expansion, and the legislature continued to kick this can down the road. And that's why this has turned into an issue where the people have come out, have amassed signatures. There is a huge drive to do this because the legislature was unwilling to take this role on. I was out of state a couple weeks ago and I was explaining this Proposition 2 to a friend of mine, and she said, well, not taking that money, that's like going to the grocery store, checking out, and then leaving your bags of groceries on the counter and walking out. It doesn't make any sense. And in the 2 years since the last time this debate happened, people have died in the state of Idaho because they could not get insurance. This needs to happen, and the legislature needs to hear the will of the people and to respond quickly and appropriately.
Thank you. Question number 4, Dr. Rusche, what are your funding priorities for the state budget?
My funding priorities for the state budget, first of all, is education. We have a constitutional duty to provide for free and appropriate education that's equivalent throughout the state. Currently, many of you remember that there was a Great Recession back about 10 years ago. The budget for public schools dropped 18%. 18%. We're just climbing out of that hole now. In fact, we aren't out of it. Due to increase in population of the state and to inflation, our per pupil funding right now is where it was in 2008. So my first priority is educational funding. The second priority after that would be infrastructure so that we can get the commerce, and that's infrastructure including water, sewer, electricity, telecommunications, as well as roads and bridges.
Thank you. Dr. Stevenson, what are your funding priorities for the state budget?
Thank you. Number one, and I agree, is education funding. We have a 5-year education plan. We're just beginning the 5th year, and I've been very pleased at the way we have kept on track, and I want us to see do that and fund education accordingly to the 5-year plan. Second, business and prosperity issues. Right now, the economy is great. People have work. We have taxes that are lower. People are happy because they have all of these things going on. And it's because we have paid attention to trying to lower taxes so that people have more to spend. And I believe that all of those tax issues will be important. I'm on the Revenue and Tax Committee, so I've been very much involved with trying to make some of those happen, whether it's a grocery tax, sales tax, property tax, all of those. And we look forward to continuing to work on those.
Thank you. Mr. Tousley, your funding priorities for the state budget.
I too think education is an extremely important thing. Recent studies by a couple of groups have cited how our best and brightest teachers are leaving the state. Many people that are getting educated here to be teachers are leaving simply because they can't find a living wage without having to take on a second job or completely work through the summer. And with student debt, with the high costs of housing, it becomes extremely important that we provide some incentive for that to happen. I also agree with Dr. Rusche, the infrastructure is extremely important. We have, look at the roads, look at Cherry Lane Bridge, we have a lot of issues here that need to be addressed. As far as jobs here, we do have jobs, but they are low-paying jobs. They are minimum wage or less, or a little bit more, and they are not providing the kind of income where people can get to that level of middle class where they can provide for their families and to provide back to the community, tax-paying people.
Thank you.
Who can do those things.
Mr. Kingsley, what are your funding priorities for the state budget?
Well, education, of course. I mean, and my opponent has said that I didn't support education, and that's just not true. I've supported education to the fullest. I was on the front lines for the high school, for LCSC's Career Technical. I will continue to fight for education, especially Career Technical, because that's where those higher paying jobs that Rick says don't exist are at. It's at having those skills that they can go into, fix these robotics and computers and things like that. So that is a priority, has been a priority, and will continue to be a priority. The next thing I think is right back to addiction issues. There's no way we should spend $500 million to build a new prison. Let's get to the bottom of why we need that prison, and let's start focusing our money towards that. So thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Stevenson, question number 5. Would you support full-day state-funded kindergartens?
We have that now, although not in all of the districts. And yes, I do support it, but it's up to the district or the school district. But as a state, we have full-day kindergarten.
Thank you. Mr. Tousley, would you support full-day state-funded kindergarten?
Absolutely. As I said earlier, having children learning early, and I have a thing about, I could transgress on this. I love kindergarten. As an elementary teacher, I love watching kindergarten, but it is transformed into something other than what we remember it as. It's a prep time to get kids ready for tests. It shouldn't be that. But I do believe they should be there. I think it's an extremely important thing. I also think preschool is important. We talk about paying on the front end. We know by second grade, again, when kids are struggling, when they are coming from homes that are not providing those kinds of things for them, that they are going to be spending time with our judicial system and legal system later on.
Thank you. Mr. Kingsley, would you support full-day state-funded kindergarten?
Yes and no. You know, I think some kids need extra nurturing, and I think that parents should decide whether or not that they're ready for that or not. But as far as the state being able to afford that, yes, I think we could. But I really would leave it up to the parents.
Thank you. Dr. Rusche, would you support full-day state-funded kindergarten?
Yes, unequivocally. And I think there's some confusion. The schools are allowed to do full day kindergarten. However, funding is only given on a half-day basis, so that the rest of it has to be made up with the local school funding. Their override levies are saved from other programs. As a pediatrician, I spent the early part of my career dealing with young children, and I know that that is the best time to do learning. The data that you've heard is absolutely true. The percentage of kids that are reading at grade level at third grade will determine how many prison beds you need a decade or 2 decades later. So anyway, we should be doing not just full-day kindergarten with good teachers, good early education teachers, but also pre-K for those who are in disadvantaged status.
Thank you. Question number 6. Mr. Tousley, explain your position on local option tax.
Well, local option tax is part of my platform. Right now, it's only allowed in certain so-called resort communities throughout the state. It's an issue that I think could help Lewiston and our region tremendously. We do get a lot of people who come here for many, many things. If we had local option taxes, which were established by our local governments, saying that we were going to put a tax on hotels or lodging or on restaurants, we would be able, and then specify what you wanted that for. One of the things I talked about doing was specify that to be able to provide incentive for contractors to build low-income housing. Right now, there's no money in it for them, and they're not willing to do it. Where is that housing for those people who are struggling to have a safe and comfortable roof over their head and to develop that? You know, where are those starter homes? Look it up. They're in almost non-existence anymore.
Thank you. Mr. Kingsley, explain your position on local option tax.
Yeah, I think that's, anyway, I think that, yes, that's something that we could introduce, but I do think that down in the legislature, there's not a lot of push towards it. I mean, it's just the reality of it. So, thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Rusche, explain your position on local option tax.
I support a local option tax for facilities and infrastructure development, similar to what we used to build the jail here. It shouldn't have been a one-off. It should be actually a way to do it to protect the property taxpayers and the fee payers. I actually, about 7 or 8 years ago, when I was on the Rev and Tax Committee, I was a co-sponsor of a bill. I didn't make it out of committee, and so in that way, Mike's right. But the biggest complaint that I hear about taxes, it isn't that the income tax is too high, that needs a big income tax cut. It's the property taxes, and the property taxes for those people, retirees on fixed income. This is a way, a local option tax for infrastructure, for needed infrastructure, is a way to unburden the property tax.
Thank you. Dr. Stevenson, explain your position on local option tax.
Local option taxes in the legislature are not going to go anywhere for a couple of reasons. One, for the moment, I mean, anything can happen later, but for the moment, the atmosphere is not conducive. First, because we've had some bad actors in the state, and so the members of the legislature are not inclined to let whoever wants to have a local option tax have it. They're just, the experience has been poor. And second, in rural Idaho, it doesn't work very well. For example, in our district, the people in Lewis County who shop here, come in and shop, they would be paying a local option tax, say. They would be paying for it, but they get nothing out of it. And so it makes it very difficult when we have such rural-urban mixtures of districts. It works in an area that's like a concentrated area, Ada County, that type of area, that's not so mixed. And so those are some of the difficulties with dealing with local option taxes in Idaho.
Thank you. Question 7 is you have an opportunity to pose a question to your opponent. Mr. Kingsley will ask Dr. Rusche. Dr. Rusche will ask Mr. Kingsley. Mr. Kingsley.
Well, this is kind of the fun part of the program. You know, and I agree with Doug. I think a lot of this can, Doug Zenner, you know, where it's just gotcha, and I don't like that. But you know, I had a long bunch of thoughts, and the one question I do have to John is you've said some not really pleasant things about Paulette Jordan, and I'm just wondering if you support her for governor.
Thank you, Mike. Paulette Jordan is the Democratic candidate for governor. I think she brings an excitement and will draw a lot of young people into the race. And so, yeah, I do support her as the Democratic candidate.
Thank you.
Dr. Rusche, you may ask Mr. Kingsley.
Thank you, Gary. Mike, why did you vote to harm local retailers by preserving a 6% discount to their out-of-state online competitors?
Well, thank you. We already have the use tax, where if you buy something from Amazon or wherever you buy it, you're supposed to go ahead and do that fee voluntarily. Now, do you do that? Well, that's between you and your, but that's the way the law is, and I think we need to enforce that. So that's why I did not support that.
Thank you. Dr. Stevenson, you can ask Mr. Tousley, and Mr. Tousley asks Dr. Stevenson. Dr. Stevenson, you're first.
Well, thank you. Rick, one of the things that I think would disturb me as a constituent and disturbs me as a representative, you have plenty of experience. You've been a teacher, so have I, which is fantastic. But you don't have experience in an elected office, and especially not one in the legislature. So I would be interested in knowing how, in preparation for becoming a representative, how many committee meetings did you go to in Boise to understand the issues of how to deal with the topics we deal with? How many visits with leadership did you have? That kind of thing in order to prepare yourself to be a representative of District 6.
Thank you for that question. One of the things my wife would chide me about when I was working on my master's degree, if I had to write a 10-page paper, I learned enough to write a 30-page paper. Because I love the research. I love reading about it. I've spent hours and hours going through committee things, and it's interesting that when I looked at committee minutes, it's rare I ever heard anything come from you, Thyra. And I looked at votes. I looked at your voting record for all the sessions you've been in. I've read those bills. My point is that I don't have that experience, but I know how to learn, and I know how to pay attention, and I see that as a tremendous challenge, and every day is a field trip in my mind, and I look forward to it. Thank you.
Mr. Tousley.
My question, as you've knocked on doors, as I have these past few months, and spoken to the people in the toughest parts of towns in District 6, what do you offer as hope to people who are working 2 or 3 jobs without benefits, who are forced to choose between a needed sack of groceries and a needed trip to the doctor, who are making it from paycheck to paycheck or maybe even falling into the payday loan pit? I'm curious, what do you say to them to offer hope?
Of course, we've been to thousands of homes talking with people, and it's been interesting to me that they don't bring up those problems, those issues. They're happy with the fact that they've got a job now, and they talk about how that's happened, how whatever we've done in government has helped, the fewer regulations and so on. They're happy about their kids going to school, that we've got the programs that we do. I don't hear those as problems. The people we've been talking with are pretty positive and really motivated to vote for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Question 8. Dr. Stevenson, what is your understanding of the issues surrounding the current teacher shortage, and what steps would you take to remedy an ever-growing shortage?
So clarify, do you mean teacher shortage in Idaho or period?
Yes. I do believe it's Idaho.
Okay. I don't view this as being a big deal. We have turnover, and there are figures, and I don't have them in front of me, but it's not anything huge that can't be solved. The State Board of Education and the schools work on retention. They have various programs. There are many things built into the education plan to deal with that, and it's our job to make sure that we're working towards it, but to dwell on it as a negative, I think, is a mistake.
Thank you. Mr. Tousley, what is your understanding of the issues surrounding the current teacher shortage in Idaho, and what steps would you take to remedy an ever-growing shortage?
I can't cite the exact percentages, but I know that the number of teachers who are leaving our state because of salary issues, because of lack of support, is greater than a lot of states, and certainly the states in our area, in our region. And one of the things that I talked about with some teachers was developing some ideas about what we can do to help retain them. And one of them would be to create student loan forgiveness programs with different incentives based on specific regions within Idaho. So new teachers in Boise School District would have certainly less than if they were going to be coming to, say, Kamei for opportunities for that. Offering possibly even help with housing if need be. Also create strong mentoring programs. A lot of teachers burn out in the first couple of years. If you have a strong mentor that is meeting you at the door the first day and saying, we're going to help you get through this to develop it. I was going to write a book earlier as my teaching experience.
Thank you.
They never taught us how to shoot a moving target.
Thank you. Mr. Kingsley, what is your understanding of the issues surrounding the current teacher shortage in Idaho, and what steps would you take to remedy an ever-growing shortage?
Well, it really comes down to money, and teachers need to be paid. And, when they can go across to Washington State and get, higher salaries, they're not going to stay here. So we need to keep, and we're on the right track with teacher pay. We're moving up the scale. We've got a good plan. I know after the 5-year plan's done, we're going to have to readdress this, but it needs to keep moving upward to keep quality teachers.
Thank you. Dr. Rusche, understanding the issues surrounding the current teacher shortage in Idaho, what steps would you take?
Well, I think there's four things that I would do. First is salary. The current teacher ladder 5-year plan tops out after 5 years. So the very skilled, qualified teachers are the ones that are most likely to be poached by Washington or Wyoming or other states. And think of it, Lewiston, you don't have to sell your house to get a $10,000 wage increase. All you have to do is change your employer. Second is, I think, the honor of the profession. We shouldn't call them union thugs. Third, you have to improve middle management. Right now, the path to have a better paycheck is to leave teaching and go to administration. You should keep good teachers teaching and have training for middle management. And the last thing is we have to figure out how to attract people into the teacher training program. We're not filling our schools of education. And for that, we should be ashamed. How in the world will we have a future if we don't have educators?
Thank you. Mr. Tousley, question 9. Water issues are complex and very important to the prosperity of our state, business interests, and private citizens. What is the state doing to protect our water sources and resources now and for the future? And what do you think needs to be done?
You know, that's a question that I haven't even addressed in all of the other issues that I've been looking at. And I'm not gonna answer because I don't have a good answer. I haven't been looking at that.
Thank you. Mr. Kingsley, water issues are complex and very important to the prosperity of our state, business interests, and private citizens. What is the state doing to protect our water sources and resources, and what do you think needs to be done?
Well, we're fortunate up here that we have plenty of water. I know out in the orchards we have issues, but the most thing, this really affects southern Idaho in a big way. And fortunately, a couple of years ago, we had a big runoff and it refilled the aquifer in the Snake River Basin, and it was definitely needed. But, are we going to continue to see maybe another drought come by where we're lacking there? So, down in southern Idaho, water is a huge issue, and we joke about it sometimes down there because, I can't remember the exact joke, and you probably don't want to hear it anyway, but it's a serious issue down there. But, we're fortunate that our water here, and we're blessed with a good supply. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Rusche, what is the state doing to protect our water sources and resources now and for the future, and what needs to be done?
I was fortunate enough to fill in for Chuck Cuddy after he was unable to serve on the board. And there's really a lot that the state is doing. We have an adjudication on southern Idaho. It's now being done in northern Idaho so that it can preserve the rights and know who really has the rights to the water and how much there is. Secondly, we're doing recharge. Mike mentioned recharge in southeastern Idaho. There's other recharge projects all along the state, even up in northern Idaho. So recharging is important. Take high spring runoffs, put them into below ground water so you can use them later. And finally, I think we're going to have to realize that water is a scarce resource, and we're going to have to be more careful with how we use it. I think the meters that we're putting in the orchards, you may not like it, but it's an important part of making a future for us.
Thank you. Dr. Stevenson, what is the state doing to protect our water sources and resources, and what do you think needs to be done?
The state has an agency who works with water, and as a matter of fact, there is a state water plan, and I recommend to people that if you're interested, it's pretty fascinating. Go to the state website and you can, or even just Google. But we have a very comprehensive set of things. Water is so precious, and it's in many states a big source of litigation and so on, of adversarial relations and everything. And so Idaho has tried to avoid a lot of that with the water plan, and we have a water master, and we have adjudication groups. It's very involved. It's not simple. You'd love to read about it and be thankful that so far up here, we're just beginning the water planning and adjudication that they've been doing in the southern part of Idaho. We're just starting to work on that in the north.
Thank you. Question 10. Mr. Kingsley, affordable housing has been identified as a major obstacle to growth, prosperity, and safety in our state. What would you do as a legislator to address this problem?
It's definitely a problem. You know, we're seeing increased prices just, you know, going up, and it's supply and demand. But yes, I think that we need to, as a state, really look at that and address, you know, how we can get affordable housing to, you know, to be better. People need a place to live, and, you know, until those jobs start to come through, we have to provide or help them with housing. You should see it in southern Idaho, where the real growth is happening around Twin Falls, Buell, those areas. They've got tons of jobs and nowhere for people to live, and they're literally living in camper trailers. So we need to address this, and we need to definitely take a look at it.
Thank you. Dr. Rusche, affordable housing is identified as an obstacle to growth. What would you do as a legislator to address this?
I think you're right that affordable housing is a big issue. There is an entity called the Idaho Housing Agency that handles a revolving loan program to assist with low-income housing. I would augment that by providing tax credits for those who build low-income housing. Now, rather than, say, a tax cut for the highest earning Idahoans, as was passed this last time, perhaps a tax credit to develop lower cost housing that would help address the issue. And finally, I think we should let communities decide if they can require, if they want to require, that a certain percentage of their new development have affordable housing as part of the makeup.
Thank you. Dr. Stevenson, affordable housing is a major obstacle. What would you do to address this problem?
If by not you, not me personally, correct?
As a legislator.
Yeah. And actually, the legislature deals with more regulations and so on as far as requesting or requiring certain amount of affordable housing issues for, and you know, I don't know what the rules are. It's very complicated. So we do quite a bit already, and I would say that we need to let that happen and not interfere. We don't want to get in the way of the plans that we have now, and they're pretty comprehensive.
Thank you. Mr. Tousley, affordable housing has been identified and in our state as a problem. What would you do as a legislator to address the problem?
Well, I certainly think there's incentives that can be provided for builders to be able to do that. John stated having a percentage of homes that are built have to be low-income housing. I want to return to the local options tax too. If you have an option to have local option tax, you also create the rules for that. And if you say everybody who's in Lewis County and everybody in Nez Perce County are excluded from that tax, that shifts that away. I'm one of those people that used to drive here for services, for medical, for groceries and everything else. I understand that would be a burden. But low-income housing means that people are going to look at the world much differently if they have a comfortable home to be able to live in. It doesn't have to be a mansion, just something comfortable, so that they can look at this community as a place where a rising tide is floating all the boats, not just the rich people.
Thank you. We're into the third part of our debate tonight, and that third part is questions from the audience. So we will start with a question for the candidates for County Commissioner, and we will go to a rotation as we have before. Mr. Zenner, how can we reduce property taxes?
Talk to them. Like I said before, property taxes is what we are stuck with, the dreaded P word. Income tax and state taxes, income tax and state taxes are what they deal with. When we get unfunded mandates and believe me, we have plenty, the legislature seems to find a way to reduce those two, and we gotta fund that mandated service with property tax. So to me, it's, you talk to them.
Thank you. Mr. Beck, how can we reduce property taxes?
I think you said it all. We have to rely on our legislature to mandate things and in the state of Idaho by the laws. So I feel that we have to work with our representatives.
Thank you. Mr. Blakey, how can we reduce property taxes?
Promote business development, bring additional businesses to this valley is one way. I do promote and I do support local option tax. That is a direct way that we can reduce the cost of the taxpayers. I would like to see us look at an auditorium tax, or sometimes referred to as a bed tax. Many of you have paid that when you leave town to go to a hotel. We don't here in Lewiston. That money could be used for several big projects. One big project could be the possible relocation of the fairgrounds. The city has 40 acres north of the high school. Great location for a relocation of the fairgrounds. An auditorium tax could be used to pay for that. Let's put all that property on Burl Avenue back on the tax rolls. There's a vision that we should be looking at. And as I said earlier, we need to give back to the taxpayers the money that you've been paying for that bond issue over the years. It's time to give it back to you, and you can have a tax savings.
Thank you. Mr. Hasenoehrl, how can we reduce property taxes?
Well, the only way really is, like I said, with the state. The other way is, like Bob was saying, we need to create businesses. Businesses need to come to town. The more people we have, the more we diverse the tax roll, okay? Other than that, there's no way of doing it. Give you an idea, I own a rental. We're talking about housing. When we own a house and a rental house. We pay double the property tax on a rental house. You're never gonna have affordable housing when you keep taxing the landlords, because they can't afford to do it. You gotta come up with a system that'll work. Statewide, I don't know, maybe give them homeowner exemption, that'll bring the rent down. But as long as the landlords are being taxed, not getting a tax break, they cannot bring the rent down. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Martin, how can we reduce property taxes?
Well, the primary purpose or solution for that would be to increase the tax base. And that's going to require industry, infrastructure, and all these areas that we all are in agreement on that need to be done. However, I don't know, there's other options. There's some developer options. We could, impose some kind of fees, sewer fees and so forth. I know they do a lot of it in California, and there's a lot of California coming here. So we might as well get ready for it. Let's increase that tax base. Business, industry, I've heard a lot of people say we need to increase, but what are we going to do to increase it? Well, we need to go outside the country. We need to go around the country. We need to find people that need what we have, and then we'll supply it. Thank you.
Thank you. This next question is for the legislators, starting with Mr. Tousley. Can you describe the type of legislation you would support to assist businesses here in our district?
Even assisting businesses that are in place, I think is important, but also bringing business in is equally important. And part of that is, I was tying this to the idea of earlier was talking about doctor shortages, and in the last debate it was talking about doctor shortages. And I talked to some doctors about that. The issue was that the educationals, they looked at our high school and they saw what was there, and they said they don't value education enough. Businesses are the same thing. We are on our way because of that tremendous jump forward that we did with the technical training school for LC plus our high school is going to be built. That is going to be bringing people here because people are going to look at our educational system and say they are serious about their citizens. That's what I'm.
Thank you. Mr. Kingsley, can you describe the type of legislation you would support to assist businesses here in our district?
Well, I might just comment the importance of our airport. You know, that, I don't care what business moves in here, that's gonna be a priority for them, is they're gonna say, can I fly back to my home, or can I go somewhere? And when we're limited like that, you know, I think that maybe the state needs to get involved with our local airport somehow. You know, there's some cities that do subsidize, or states that subsidize, you know, areas, and I think we need to look at this, because this is a serious issue. You know, it's just so disappointing that Alaska decided to move out, but they have. So now what are we gonna do? We better figure out a way to make that airport very viable, to attract businesses and get even bigger airlines in here, or bigger things, so people can get out of here. And that's really a very important issue that I think we need to address at the state for Lewis and Nez Perce County, this, you know, our district.
Thank you. Dr. Rusche, legislation you would support to assist businesses here in our district?
Well, just briefly, I have participated in legislation to assist building. I was one of the co-sponsors on the economic development bill with Mike Moyle that allowed the property tax deferral for Vista and for Clearwater Paper. I also was the one of the negotiators in developing the reduction of the business personal property tax that removed that tax on 85% to the businesses in Idaho. So tax fairness and developmental with tax is something you can do, but I think what's really important, as Rick said, education for the workforce, infrastructure. I mean, everybody wants to subsidize, use state money to subsidies, but right now the state legislature is into the tax cut mode. Cut $230 million out of revenue. The first 2 months of the year, they're below projections, but now they want to use the revenue to support the airport. I think that having an airport's important, but so is telecommunications, water, power, and having a great community so you can have somebody who comes and takes a look at it and sees that your school is good.
Thank you. Dr. Stevenson, legislation you would support to assist businesses here in our district?
We already have quite a lively group of, in our Department of Commerce and Department of Labor, a group of people who have programs in place. They bring certain bills to the legislature of things that will support businesses in a variety of ways, whether it's a package of items, not just one. And it varies depending on the economic environment. And I think that we need to support the labor and commerce when they bring these things forward and listen to them. And we've had great success. Some I have voted against, some I voted for, but they have their use, and we do have programs that come forward. And I would not personally bring them. I rely on them to bring them.
Thank you. This next question is for the commissioners. Mr. Martin, can we finance the new courthouse through a local option sales tax and by the state of Idaho paying court costs to the counties?
If we had to, we could. I don't see where the state's gonna start funding our courts anytime soon. And that's a huge, huge sum of money there. You talk about the county going up in budget. I would imagine that's increased 2 or 3-fold over the last 10 years. However, it all boils down to increase that tax base. I'm looking here now, I'm reviewing it. I stated in the beginning of this conversation, or this debate, Korea. Korea is an answer. It's a huge answer. That's a country that is open for our wood products. they think our wood products are by far the best. They get a lot out of Canada, they get some out of China. They need to get some out of Idaho.
Thank you. Mr. Beck, can we finance a new courthouse through a local option tax and by the state of Idaho paying court costs to the counties?
I don't think so. I think that the cost of the judicial system has gone up. I think the county has appropriated or $1.1 million for just possibly one murder trial and possibly 3 others. I'm not sure that we can really get the state to buy into something like that. They're having a hard time. We're having a hard time in this area here. It seems like we keep raising taxes. We keep just stumbling over ourselves. I think we need to get that tax base built up here. Are you URA going where there's infrastructure coming in to bring more money in? I think we're just getting taxed too much.
Thank you. Mr. Blakey, can we finance a new courthouse through a local option tax and by the state of Idaho paying court costs to the counties?
If you remember, years ago, when the county first tried to build a jail and it was unsuccessful, the state allowed the city of Nez Perce County to impose a short-term tax, a half cent. Half of that cent was, that half a cent was used to go towards the building of the jail. So the answer is yes. If the state was to allow us to have local option taxes, building an infrastructure project like the courthouse would be one of the projects that would be qualified. It could not go in, you understand that local option tax money cannot go back into the budget. As far as asking the state to fund a courthouse, I doubt that they'd fund one in Nez Perce County, because my feeling is every county would get in line and want a piece of that action too. That's our responsibility.
Thank you. Mr. Hasenoehrl, can we finance a new courthouse through a local option tax and by the state of Idaho paying court costs to the counties?
I think that's a good question. I'm with Bob. I'm part of what we paid on our retail sales. We paid that half-cent tax for the jail. I think that's a great idea. Sales tax is probably the most fair tax. You know, it gives everybody a chance to make payments instead of putting on the landowners, sorry, the homeowners. So we've tried that before. If we can do it, the sales tax would be the most fair tax to do a new courthouse. But I don't see it happening at this time.
Thank you. Mr. Zenner, can we finance a new courthouse through local option tax and the state paying court costs?
I think everybody's pretty well hit on the same subject. The sales tax, half cent's a fair way to do it. Will it get done? What kind of sideboards the legislature puts on it, that'll be totally out of our hands. But one thing we need to do is make sure that as a community and as a county and as a citizens group, for whatever reason, we need to go lobby for it. They're not gonna do anything if we don't lobby for it. That's the first things. And believe me, we've lobbied for a lot of things. Public defense, transportation projects, increase in some of those justice levies for counties that only get, are getting reduced timber dollars. It was met with like, not only no, but you know the word, no. So we need to lobby for it. So if we want anything, we're gonna have to lobby for it. And believe me, the property tax reduction through a half-cent sales tax is the way to go for any project, as long as it's project-specific.
Thank you. And the next question is for the legislators, the legislative candidates. There you go. Perfect. Mr. Kingsley, do you support arming school teachers?
Boy, that's a tough, I really think that we need to do something. I know I think it ought to be left up to the teachers to decide that, but, it's just a matter of time. We need to do something, and Marvin Duggar's here, and Marvin and I have had many conversations, about what we could do, and after the last school shooting, we both were pretty close to just going down there and sitting on the sidewalk to try to protect kids, because, you know, it's just tragic. You know, and I do think we need to really be looking at that. I even called other legislators and said, you know, we need to get together on this, because, you know, it's just a matter of time. You know, we need, and the other part that leads to mental health. You know, we need to really start looking at kids and finding out where they're at and working with them, because this is a tragedy. But thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Rusche, do you support arming school teachers?
No.
Thank you. Dr. Stevenson, do you support arming school teachers?
Yes, I voted for the bill. We had one, and it, I can't remember whether it passed the legislature or not, I mean, the complete legislature, but the idea was that it would be then up to the school district whether or not they wanted to do anything about it, but we gave them the possibility. I support that. Just like we, as a pilot, that after 9/11, we, of course, I always flew for outfits where we flew armed, but after 9/11, that pilots could carry in the flight deck.
Thank you. Mr. Tousley, do you support arming school teachers?
I think in certain circumstances, that might be an appropriate response to what we perceive as being this threat today. Schools that are in extreme rural situations, but overall, I find that really tough as an educator of 39 years to think that's what we are looking at. And once again, this is one of those questions where we're looking at the effect of something rather than looking at the causes of something. And if we don't deal with the causes of why we have this as an issue, we'll just continue to turn our schools and our other places into fortresses. And as I've said to some other people, I always thought of our country as being Athens, but I feel like with this kind of mentality, more and more and more, as a general idea, we're becoming Sparta. And I'm not sure I like that.
Thank you. We have a question for all our panelists, and we will start at one end, closest to me, and go right down the line. Dr. Rusche, what will you do to help solve the highway access problem at the casino?
The highway access problem with the casino you need to have a revision of the highway there. So that requires both federal, state, and I think tribal involvement in paying for it. I'm not a highway engineer, I'm a chemical engineer, but a highway engineer, and I don't see any way that you get across a lane of traffic moving 65 miles an hour without either going above it or below it. So I think that's what needs to be done, and it should be a high priority, not just for the legislature, but for our congressional people as well.
Thank you. Mr. Kingsley, what will you do to help solve the highway access problem at the casino?
We took a tour with the Idaho Department of Transportation about 2 years ago, and that was on the bus. I said, what can we do? And they said a majority of the issue does follow to the tribe, and that the tribe has got a plan to redo the whole thing. But you know, this is such a, it's like it's horrible. But you know, what I would do right away is see if maybe we could change the speed limits and start flashing yellow lights way down at the end and slow it down to 45 miles an hour and then back up. I think that would do a lot to, at least for the short term until the plan gets completely done, but something needs to be done.
Thank you. Mr. Tousley, what will you do to help solve the highway access problem at the casino?
I pretty much reflect what Mike has said. I drive that. I have family that lives upriver. I mean, we all drive it. And when you go to Orofino, you better be going 50 or less, or you're going to get a ticket or get a warning. When you go to when you go into Kamei, it drops to 35 to 25. There shouldn't be any reason why we can't drop that speed limit going through that section of that. That's an issue. That is a serious issue, and we all drive it worried that could happen to us. Just drop it down. Take it to 35 or 45. It's, what is it, mile and a half?
Yeah.
We can do that.
Thank you. Dr. Stevenson. What will you do to help solve the highway access problem at the casino?
What would I do, or what is the legislature doing? Actually, ITD does have a plan, and it involves a lot of players, tribe. I think the Army Corps is in there, the city, county, everybody. Complicated. And they have, it's involved a lot of talking and a lot of negotiating and a lot of money. And what they wanted to do was to start with the simplest thing, which was the current fix, and see how that worked. And looks like maybe we go to Plan B already, and then work towards the most complicated of the solutions, which is very expensive and will require a lot of people who are at the table.
Thank you. Mr. Zenner, what will you do to help solve the highway access problem at the casino?
Well, to me, I would start out with one, whenever the traffic coming out from the casino is going to the east, there needs to be an acceleration lane put in. I mean, that's an easy fix, there's plenty of room there, they can handle it. But like everybody else said, when you go to Orfino to cross the bridge, there's flashing lights, there's a speed limit. We already have speed limit reduction in Lapway and a few other places. That's an easy call by ITD. The big solution is an overpass somewhere, so we really don't have this crash nightmare that we have now. But to start out with, an acceleration lane going east, pretty simple. We already have one going west. That's easy. Lights, speed reduction, like everybody else said. And then the major solution is going to take federal highway dollars to fix. And that's up to the tribe and ITD.
Thank you. Mr. Hasenoehrl.
I think everybody's hit it pretty well on the head there. You got to ask yourself, what's a life worth? You know, we just lost a 23-year-old. What's a life worth? I mean, slow down. We need to put a slow down sign. We need to slow down to 35, 25, whatever it takes, slow down. People get impatient. They want to go out there. They get hit. Eventually, we should have an overpass over that. So, slow down. What is a life worth? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Blakey.
I don't really think I'll be adding anything new. We've already come up with all the solutions, but you've heard the problems too. It's funding. It's funding and getting everybody on the same page, getting LTD and getting the NPO and talking to the states, talking to the Fed, talking to the tribe, and getting everybody on the same page to address the issue, and then finding the money. And it's always, show me the money. In the end, that's the question that has to be answered. If you wanted a quick answer, maybe we don't allow left-hand turns right in there, right in front of the casino. We move left-hand turns further up, somewhere a little bit to the east or further to the west, and we don't allow left-hand turns from the traffic heading towards Orfino. We just make it a little more difficult to get into the facility and spread that demand out over a larger area. But again, it's a much complicated question and one that none of us are going to solve right here, but we know where the answer is: money.
Thank you. Mr. Beck.
I agree with all that's been said. I know originally there was a cloverleaf design that was to be put in that costs millions of dollars, and I think it is definitely a funding issue. But I agree that we do need to slow down. I used to drive that road almost every day, and 65 is just too fast through there. More like 45. I think we'd cut down a lot of accidents.
Thank you. Mr. Martin.
Well, do the easiest thing first. Do what they did in Lapway, the reductions from 65 to 55 and then to 45 for that stretch, a little bit further on each end. And then you're eventually gonna have to have an overpass, that, I believe that's the responsibility of the tribe. I really do. They're the ones benefiting from people going in and out of there. Why can't they pay for that? And they are a sovereign nation, but the federal government's over them anyway. So I defer that to the feds, probably write a letter.
Thank you. This program will be rebroadcast on Channel 56 and will be available at the City of Lewiston's YouTube website. Refer to your flyer for the address or Google Lewiston, Idaho YouTube. Pre-registration is now online at idahovotes.gov until this Friday, October 12th. Voting is currently happening at Nez Perce County Courthouse until Friday before the November 6th election. Be prepared with picture ID and a valid driver's license and proof of residency in Nez Perce County. Take home the yellow sheets that you have passed out and become familiar with the two propositions on the ballot. Voter information is available on idahovotes.gov. Thank you all for being here, and to our viewing audience, this program is brought to you as one way to become involved and informed voter. A special thanks to the Lewis Clark State College media staff for making this production possible. Thank you for all the candidates, and good night, Nez Perce County.
Pretty lively.
You know, it really wasn't fair.